couple of minutes, last few minutes, I want to share something that's very, very close to me. And I think it means something, maybe to some of you that are here. I've been a student of Texas history for as far back as I can remember. And you cannot believe the joy I had when I realized that the Lord was sending us down to Victoria, Texas, near the birthplace of Texas liberty. In the city of Victoria, Colonel Fannin and his men were leaving Goliad, and they were trying to get to the city of Victoria when he met General Cost and half of the Mexican army in a little place called Coleto Creek. And there was a tremendous battle there. They were marched back to the Presidio La Bahia in Goliad, and later many of them were executed there at that site. I cannot tell you the joy that I had when I finally got to San Antonio and stood in front of my wife will tell you, I stood in front of the Alamo for 20 minutes without moving. I stood there like a statue. Because I realized that edifice there, that was what was standing there. At the far back right-hand corner of that fort, that building was there when those defenders perished. Probably many of the Louisiana Grays, the New Orleans Grays, were a group of soldiers that came to Louisiana to help defend the Alamo. And so I have a tremendous appreciation for Texas history. One of the greatest books of Texas history is called the Texian Iliad. And it's written from a very interesting perspective of soldiers and civilians on both sides of the conflict, those that were officers in Santa Anna's army, to the foot soldiers, to the settlers and the slaves, and all the people that were involved there that were able to give their story. And he gives one of the most accurate pictures of how Texas won its independence. A lot of people don't realize that Burnett, and Burnett is a man that we have counties and cities named after here in Texas. Burnett was ready to lead a rebellion to have Sam Houston either kicked out of Texas or hung. He didn't believe, him and a lot of these Texas soldiers didn't believe they ought to keep retreating. And they got as far as Nacogdoches, and they were just about ready to hang him high and turn around and go to, they wanted to go to San Antonio to help defend the Alamo. And through a series of either brilliant military moves or just luck, or maybe providence of God, the Texas Army was able to stay intact and to be able to do a surgical strike there at San Jacinto that turned. Do you realize that the Mexican Army wasn't defeated at San Jacinto? The biggest army, the biggest contingency of the Mexican Army was still intact under General Cost. And Santa Anna was captured, and he told Cost to surrender, but the Mexicans could have come in there and wiped the Texas Army out. There's all these little elements about Texas history that we don't know. We just enjoy the state. But I've always been fascinated with the defense of the Alamo, and I've been experiencing some things that I see a parallel to in defending the Alamo. And here's the thing. The Alamo was a broken down mission established by Spanish monks back in around 1770, 1720. It had been a stronghold for the Mexican army, for the Spaniards, for the Mexican army, the Texicans. Went back and forth several times. Jim Bowie finally kicked the Mexicans out, the Mexican army out of the Alamo and took possession of it when General Houston sent Travis down to the Alamo to bivouac some soldiers there. There's about 100 men, 120, 130 men. And they were there just to hold that position to keep the Mexicans from taking it again. It was not the main army. Most of those that were with Travis were volunteers. Well, excuse me, about half of them volunteers, others were Texas regulars. Then we know that David Crockett got tired of being in Congress in Tennessee and got some of his mountaineers. And they showed up, and volunteers from different parts of the state began to gather because Travis had sent out a letter asking for help. Here's what a lot of Texans don't realize about Texas history. Travis was never supposed to stay at the Alamo. He was actually sent by General Houston to gather the cannons out of there so that the cannons wouldn't fall in the hands of the Mexican army, and they were to fight a retreating battle to join forces with Sam Houston. to increase the size of the main body of the Texas Army. But Travis got there, and in a co-command with Bowie and Davy Crockett, they decided it's better to stay here and defend this position. And as history tells us, if the Alamo hadn't happened, San Jacinto would not have happened. What happened at the Alamo was essential, was crucial. The men that defended it never knew that. They never realized it. And you can imagine Travis sending out these letters asking for help. And then one day the brave 32 from Gonzales show up on horseback. And they think, oh, our help has come. But you know, it was a little help, and it wasn't enough help. And then they have, what, 170 men or so, 185 men, the day that 3,000 Mexican soldiers show up a mile away. And we know how the story goes. I have found myself at times feeling like I'm defending the Alamo, a broken down mission that's had greater days, gone to defend just because it didn't want it to fall into the hands of the enemy.
Come on, sir.
Didn't want it to. Brother Phil can tell you a story of there's a church on the way on the highway up towards his to the city that he pastors in. It used to be a church. Were you planning on sharing that story?
I forgot about it.
It was a church right there on the highway. Great location. It was a church building, but it closed. And I don't know the history, if it was church trouble or I don't know what happened, but the church closed. Guess what business bought the church? A casket company. Guess what they put in place of the steeple on top of the church? An open casket. Isn't that true? Am I telling the truth? An open casket on the top of a former church building. Now, which hurricane was it to come through? Was it Rita? Hurricane Rita came in and blew that casket off the top of that building, and I don't guess they ever put one back. But isn't that a sad commentary? What kind of message does that speak? You know, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. What does that picture tell? That used to be a church. Man, it's dead, dead, dead. I mean, those 3 days